Family and friends are remembering a 22-year-old man killed in a crash on Chapman Highway. Pierce Corcoran was the son of Knoxville Fire Department spokesperson Captain DJ Corcoran. That crash happened Saturday evening in the 4700 block of Chapman Highway. That is near the intersection of Winfield Drive in South Knoxville.
For firefighters responding to that crash, it was as if they were trying to save the life of one of their own. 10 News reporter Mark Salinger tells us more about the young man killed. Mark.
Robin and John, Pierce Corcoran was driving with his girlfriend down Chapman Highway Saturday night when his life ended far too soon. Now the Knoxville Fire Department is rallying around one of their own captains.
You do the same job, but you have the passion knowing that it's one of your own.
The Knoxville Fire Department responds to dozens of calls every day. Saturday night, a crash on Chapman Highway hit close to home.
It's not my child, but in a sense, it's our family's child, and it's painful.
Pierce Corcoran and his girlfriend, Jade Adams, were in his Honda Civic when they were hit head-on by a pickup truck that had veered into oncoming traffic. Corcoran later died at UT Medical Center.
Passions are higher. The performance anxiety is higher. The questions about what did I do right, what did I do wrong are higher.
In the past 3 years, there have been 10 fatal crashes on a 22-mile stretch of Chapman Highway from South Knoxville to Sevierville. 12 people died in those crashes. The Tennessee Department of Transportation says there are projects on Chapman Highway currently under development to help improve safety for drivers, including widening lanes and improving sight distance for drivers.
For those that were on that scene, you know, they wish they could have changed the outcome. Sometimes we can, sometimes we cannot. But it weighs heavy.
44-year-old Francisco Eduardo was arrested in connection with the crash for driving without a license and is currently being held for immigration and customs enforcement. Francisco Eduardo's son was driving in the truck with him at the time of the crash. He tells me they braked to avoid another car and were hit, pushing them into oncoming traffic.
And additional charges are still pending as the investigation into the crash continues. Francisco Eduardo's son told me his father is from Mexico and has been in the United States for more than 10 years. Robin and John.